Welcome once again to the Pitt's Theology Library webinar on citation. Today we're calling our workshop Citation Made Easy, Style, Guides, and Zotero. Our plan for today is to walk you through just a very brief explanation of citation, what it is, why it's important, and why you should pay attention to it. And then we will turn and spend most of our time talking about the Zotero app, which you might have heard of or even be familiar with. Hopefully, we'll be able to show you how to get started using Zotero and how to troubleshoot some common issues that arise. My name is Brady Beard. I'm the Reference and Instruction Librarian at Pitt's, and I'm joined today by Janelle Moore, one of the graduate reference assistants here at Pitt's Library. So citation is really just a way to refer or directly quote from another person's work, either their writings or an essential idea that makes up part of their identity as a writer, a researcher, or an author. And citation styles can vary from type to type. Some styles are inline parenthetical citations, and other styles include footnotes or endnote citations. Regardless of which style you choose, citing the work of other people is an important and central feature to writing academic work. And it's important for a number of reasons. First, citation is important because it can help your readers to know what ideas are your own and which ideas come from other people, where you are building upon another person's work or where you are charting your own path. And so citation is a really important way to help other people know and understand your research, but also to demonstrate your capabilities as a researcher. You can sometimes think of citation as a sort of expanded bibliography. It can be really helpful as a way of signaling to other readers that you've actually done the work of reading and researching and understanding the topic that you're working from. Those of you who take classes at Candler or another seminary know that sometimes citation is a really important way to show your professors that you have actually done the readings that they've assigned to you throughout the course. Citation is also a way to establish yourself as a credible researcher and to strengthen your own argument. We all know that arguments are best supported by facts. They're most convincing when there's some sort of support for the argument, and so citation can be a way to do that. And then finally, citation is a way to allow other people to verify your work, to see if you are actually quoting someone correctly or if you're taking their words out of context, or to see if your own perspective and your argument lines up with the work across a field of research. The types of information that you'll want to be sure to include in your citation include general source information about the item that you're citing. What is the title of the work? Does it come in a series? Is it a volume in a larger collection? The author or the writer's name. Who produced this work? Who edited it? And who translated it? This is often very difficult to find when you're using an online resource, for instance. We'll talk about an example like this in a little bit. You also want to be sure to include the publisher information, the location and the date that an item was produced. And then perhaps most important of all, how to find that source. The page numbers, the URL, and other location information. One caveat to this is that you don't need to cite words that are your own or ideas that are your own. Or if you're engaging in primary research, it's usually enough to simply provide an in-text citation for that primary text. In the field of theology, of course, the Bible is probably the most common sort of primary source. And so you don't need to worry about providing a footnote, for instance, to the book of 1 Timothy if you're quoting it, but just to say in the body of your work, 1 Timothy chapter 3 or whatever. Sometimes it is useful to include the translation information for the edition of the primary source that you are using. but that can often be done right in the main body of your text, and so it's not always thought of as a citation proper. And then finally, you aren't required to cite what may be known as common knowledge. And common knowledge will vary from field to field, but in general, it's the sort of information that you might expect someone in your audience to know without having to look it up, or that they might be able to find that information very easily through a Google search. I'm going to pause here very quickly to just encourage you today, as we go through this webinar, to use the Q&A or the chat feature to submit any questions that you might have. We will take questions toward the end of the webinar, and we'll try our best to answer as many questions as we can within the allotted time. And then, as I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded, and so you will receive a link to where this recording exists after our time together today if you need to go back and watch it again. Citation styles vary fairly widely across the academic disciplines. In theology and religious studies, the most common types of citation styles are the Chicago or Turabian style, the Society of Biblical Literature style, and the APA style. All of these styles have guides that are available online, and if you download this PowerPoint from the handouts section of the webinar, these links will actually take you directly to where the style guides exist in their online form. A quick word about Chicago and Turabian styles. You may have had a professor in the past who told you to cite your work using the Turabian style, or perhaps to use Chicago style. And those are essentially the same type of style. Chicago and Turabian are exactly the same. Chicago is the style used for publication, and Turabian is the version of that style for student papers and things like that. So if you hear your professor or librarian or another person at your school talk about Chicago or Turabian styles, just know that they're talking about the same thing. The second style guide that's quite common in theological and religious studies is, of course, the Society of Biblical Literature style guide. SBL style is a variant of Chicago and Turabian. It's essentially the same with a few key exceptions. And those exceptions get fewer and fewer with each passing year and every revision of both the SBL style and the Chicago style. So in sort of my recommendation to you is that if you have a question about which style guide you should use, go ahead and go with Chicago. Chicago and SBL both use a footnote style, and they are virtually the same with a few exceptions. So don't stress about those differences too much. APA is a very different type of style than Chicago or Turabian, and I would recommend only using it if you have experience using that style guide before, perhaps from undergrad or your professional life before seminary, or if a professor requires you to write in that style. Chicago and SBL are quite easy to use once you get the hang of it. As with most things in life, practice makes perfect when it comes to citations. So once you get in and work with Chicago, just keep using it until it feels like it's second nature. You can find general help for all sorts of citation questions in a few really great places. The first is the Purdue Owl. This website is available to you from anywhere in the world. It is Purdue University's writing center, and they have all sorts of wonderful citation materials available to you on their website. Example papers, you can search for specific questions on what type of style you should use, or what a particular citation will look like in, say, Chicago style. And so I would stop by the OWL, just bookmark it in your web browser. It can be a really useful place to visit routinely. And then, of course, your friendly neighborhood reference librarian, whether that's one of the reference librarians at Pitts or at your theological seminary. We are here to help you with all sorts of citation questions. We get them all the time, and sometimes we like to try to one-up each other on our citation knowledge. So feel free to send us an email or use the Ask feature on our website to ask us citation questions. Now, the best way to do citation in your research and in your papers, in my opinion, is to use a citation software. Citation software really takes the bulk of the work of doing citation away from you and automates it. We are going to demonstrate for you today how to use Zotero to basically create libraries and to run citations for all of your work during your time in seminary or your research. Zotero is our recommended software because it's free, it's relatively easy to use, and it has a robust online community of people who answer questions and submit questions and can help troubleshoot in the event that a librarian or another individual isn't available to help you. And so a couple of key takeaways before we turn to Zotero. Citation is an important way to make sure that other people can find the sources and engage your work on a scholarly level. Citation is really pretty simple if you sort of pick one style and stick to it as much as you can. Our recommendation is, of course, Chicago or Turabian. And then to make things even easier for yourself, be ready to download Zotero and use it to the best of your ability. Don't worry about following along too much in this next session. Just watch as Janelle demonstrates how to use Zotero, and then if you have questions, feel free to ask them, and like I said, we'll answer them toward the end of our time together. And Jenna will talk about this a bit, but Zotero does have a really robust online community. And so if you have any questions, you can also turn to their help center as well. And now I'm going to turn it over to Janelle, and she's going to demonstrate for you how to download and set up your Zotero account, and then how to use it with a couple of different citation examples. So Janelle, take it away.
All right, thank you, Brady. So where you want to begin is simply zotero.org, and that'll give you this nice red download button that you will follow. And then you'll see it's got Zotero for Mac, but then also Windows down here. And then the important thing when you download is that you want to make sure you get both downloads. You want the standalone software here to the left-hand side of my screen, but also the Zotero connector. And it can tell that I'm using Chrome, so that's the one that's featured here, but you can also download for other internet browsers. But from our experience, we would highly recommend that you either choose Chrome or Firefox. It does not work. It is not quite as strong on those other browsers. And so as I go through, you'll see like it is so helpful to have this on your browser that it is indeed definitely worth switching your primary browser if you mostly use one of these other ones, because when the connector is working well on the browser, it can just save you so much time. It is so helpful. So I'm not going to download right now because I do already have this downloaded, but you would simply click download for both of these on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. And then whether you have a Mac or a Windows computer, you would simply follow it. It'll give you step-by-step instructions on how to get that downloaded and launched. One other thing I would mention about this first step of downloading is that I would highly recommend completely closing out of Word before you download. Zotero can be a little bit picky about the order of operations, and it prefers that you download this while Word is closed. And then also going forward, as you use Zotero, it always prefers that you open Zotero first and then open Word. And if not, it can just be a little bit glitchy. All right, so that's step one, downloading. Step 2 is we strongly recommend that you create a Zotero account. And this is so that, say, were you to have computer challenges down the road, or if you needed remote access, you wanted to be able to pull up a citation quickly, by setting up an account and then syncing your account, which we'll look at next. If you have an account, then all of your citation references are stored in the cloud for you. So there's no reason not to set up your account. And then one little small thing to note here as well: as you set up an account, I would just recommend that don't use your school account. May as well go ahead and use an account that's going to stay with you after graduation, just so that you can ensure continued access to your citations and your data. Okay, so step 1, we've downloaded. Step 2, we have created an account. Now we want to sync. So you would just open it. You'll just have this little Z for Zotero. You'll open that app. And so now, and of course mine's already populated with folders and different papers that I've used this for. Yours would be totally empty. And we just want this app to be connected to the account that you would have just completed on Zotero.org. And so to do that, we are simply going to click Zotero and then click Preferences. And then up here, you'll see there are a bunch of little icons. We're going to click the sync icon. And mine is already linked, but if it were not, then it would give you the opportunity here to input your username and your password. And then I would recommend going ahead. It gives you these options, but I would recommend going ahead and checking all 4 boxes. And this will just ensure, as I mentioned earlier, that all of your citations and then also any of the files that have been saved with your citations are stored in the cloud for your continued future access. Okay, so that is the very beginning of getting started with your account and with Zotero. The next thing we want to do is make sure that Zotero is up and running in Word, because it's great to have all your citations saved, but they're not going to do you that much good unless you can also have them right at your fingertips when you're writing your paper. So if Zotero has properly installed in Word, which it should, then you will see just how you have all these different tabs across the top. You should now have a brand new tab that just says Zotero, that you can click up here at the top, and then you've got these new buttons that will say Add Citation and Add Bibliography. If, however, it does occur pretty frequently that you've downloaded, you open Word, and there's no new tab, there are several things that you can do to quickly remedy the situation. The first thing, as I mentioned, would simply be to close out Zotero and close out Word, and then open Zotero first, open Word second, and see if it pops up. For whatever reason, Zotero does always want to be first. If, however, that does not do the trick, we'll go back to Zotero. We'll go back to that Preferences tab that we had just been looking at. And now we had been under the sync icon. Now we're going to move over to the cite icon. And it defaults to styles, but you'll just want to switch over to word processors. And then you can click Reinstall Microsoft Word Add-in. So that's a second troubleshooting option. And then briefly, a third would be to go, if you're on Zotero, to click Tools and then Add On. And then you could always, here it says Zotero Word for Mac integration. You could always disable and then re-enable. And then, as Brady mentioned, Zotero has just a very robust help site. So even if you're not on Zotero.org, if you just go to your internet browser and search, Zotero not working in Word, that'll take you to all sorts of discussion board threads. And also they've got some really great video content as well that can help walk you through these steps again. All right, so now let's say we've got our Word up and running. We have our Zotero downloaded, our account set up. The next thing to do is to just go ahead and create a folder for whatever project you're working on. If you're a student, I recommend, I've always found it helpful to have, for example, a folder for a class, and then say, in this case here, I've got a final paper I was working on, and then a shorter presentation that had different types of sources. But it really does save you time later if you start with just creating folders for the particular projects that you are going to be using Zotero for. So in this case, I just have created a new folder, Zotero Workshop. And so I'm going to click on that. It's helpful to have whatever project you're working on open in Zotero. And now that I've done that, everything that I add to Zotero is going to go straight to that folder. So we are going to come back to the internet, and I'm just going to quickly show you what it's like to use the extension on Chrome, but it's very similar on Firefox. And we'll pull something from Discovery, from Amazon, and from ATLA. But just know that the steps I'm taking are very similar were you to simply be on Google or on JSTOR. All of this applies, and Zotero is very versatile. So first, I want to bring your attention to this tiny little, it looks like a folder image up here on my browser. So that is the little icon for Zotero. And I've already searched in Discovery a resource that I want to add to my folder, Zotero Workshop. And it can be easy to forget and simply just click Add Now. If I did that, it's not going to pull over as much data as it could. So it's important to go ahead and actually click on the source and then watch. This icon here is changing. I don't know if you caught that. It happens quickly, but it starts off just kind of this grayed out, looks like a document. And then as my page fully loads, it now looks like a blue book. So always wait till your page is fully loaded, because that just gives it the best shot possible of pulling over all the data on your source. And so now that we've got this book, I'm just going to click it. And you'll see here, it says that it's saving to Zotero Workshop. If I change my mind and realize, oh, wait, I'm not in the right folder, I could simply just click down and say, no, I want this to go to my A-term class. I want this to go to summer projects. But we'll keep it in Zotero Workshop. And we really recommend as you go. So the Chrome extension is very powerful, but it's not perfect. So we recommend as you go, take a quick look at the entry. And so thankfully, we already had our Zotero folder open here. So I can just quickly scan and see, okay, I got the type correct. It's got the author's name in properly, last name first, then first name. It's got the location, it's got the date. So this all looks very clean. Some common mistakes that Zotero sometimes gets confused about, just to keep your eyes out for. Language, that's really important. If you happen to be doing research in a different language, you definitely want to make sure that Zotero has picked up the correct language there, or else it just gets very confused. So if it's English, you don't need to put anything in. It might put in English for you. It might just leave it blank, and that's fine. But if it's in Spanish or French or Arabic, definitely change that. And then another thing, item type. So this book is not an edited volume, but if it were an edited volume, what you could do is click Book Section. And that's a really helpful one because then it gives you the chance to write the title of the chapter, and then still keeps the book title. And then here you'll see next to the author's name, there's a plus and a minus button. And so what you would want to do if this were in fact an edited volume, you would want to click this button here, and then it gives you an option, author, contributor, editor. And so you just want to make sure that you've got the author's name, but then also the editor's. And that can also be, especially in the case of co-authored books, Zotero can get that confused and will think maybe one author is an editor or one was the translator, when in fact they were co-editors. And so to change that, you would just simply come here. All right, so that's example number 1, Discovery, very straightforward, and it happened to be very accurate on this example. And then wonderfully, Zotero can do this exact same process on Amazon, which is such a time saver. So we are going to watch as this icon turns from a little grayed out document to now a blue book, which is great. And then we'll just click that button and we'll come and see how did Zotero do. And in this case, I would give Zotero 100% on the sharp example, the one that we pulled from Discovery. It got all the data that I needed. This time, however, I'm noticing that it did not include a location. And I will be using Chicago style, which means that we always need the city in which this book was published. And so typically, if we'd caught this now, typically I would go ahead and go in and type New York. But right now, instead, I'm just going to flag for you that that is a mistake that Zotero left out. But we'll actually go in and fix it later in Word so that even if you don't catch Zotero's mistakes as you're inputting your citations, you can always go back and make edits by refreshing Zotero and refreshing your Word document. So I'll show you that later. But while we're on the note of place, that is worth noting. Sometimes Zotero will pull over an American city and a European city. And if that's the case, feel free to just go ahead and only keep the American city. You don't need multiple cities in there. Or sometimes it'll give you the city and the state. And again, you don't need the state, you just need the city. So that's a small edit that you can make while you're inputting your citations. All right, so I'm going to show you one more example, and then we'll be ready to write this pretend paper and build out our bibliography. So now I'm in ATLA, and I am going to pull over an article by our very own Emory's Diane Stewart. Oops, except I guess I have had this up too long, so give me one moment, and I will come back to ATLA. Fabulous. All right, so this was on Dolores Williams. Okay, thank you for bearing with me. All right, here we are. And so again, I don't know if you saw it changes so quickly, but at first it had a little grayed out document, and now it's a bright white document. So actually the little image changes based on what type of material you're trying to cite. You'll notice that if it is a dissertation, it actually changes into like a little mortarboard graduation cap. And if it is a film, it'll change into a little camera. And so Zotero is typically pretty intuitive about what type of resource it is, but that's always worth double checking, because if it gets that wrong, then it will not know what type of data you need to be storing for your citation. All right, so we're going to just click that nice little white document button. And we are now done on the internet for now. So we'll come back and we'll check, and it looks like it's got journal article correct, title, author, publication, page numbers, issue, volume, date. So it's got all the sorts of things that I would want for an article. And one thing to note that is very cool, that is specific to using Zotero with articles: when the full text is available, Zotero will not only scrape all the data you need for the citation, it will also, when it can, pull over the article for you. And so now I have that article itself saved with the citation. All right, so we now have a very, very tiny list of sources. Now, the last step is simply to show you how to cite inside the paper and then how to build your bibliography. So we're getting close. Hope that you are still following along. And again, just a reminder that this will be recorded, so you can always go back and skip the parts that you already know and replay the parts that might be new to you. All right, so let's say I'm going to say Sharp argues, Stewart contends, yet Welch adds that. Okay, so just pretend that this is a coherent paragraph, and now it's time to cite. But first things first, I'm just going to click on Add Edit Citation. And we give it a minute, and now we've got this red bar. And typically you can just search by the author's name, and clearly I've used this book a lot, so it comes up a bunch of times, but if you're new to Zotero, you'll just have that one option. So you can search by the author's name, or if you've, some reason you've blanked on the author's name, you could even search like a keyword in the book. And in either case, it pulls up the correct citation for me in the wake on Blackness and Being. So that's great. So I can just go ahead and enter it if I'm simply wanting to make a point about the book in general. However, if I want to actually cite a specific page because maybe I'm quoting or I'm paragraphing something that's really particular, you want to click here before you click enter, and then it'll come down with these options. So page number, and so you don't have to put in like a P or P period or anything. You just put the page number that it's on. And then another thing that is handy that's worth noticing here is prefix. I'm not going to use that because I am just going to say that I'm quoting something particular on page 19 of Sharp's book. However, if I were simply wanting to say, I've written an argument and then I want to put in a footnote, compare this to somebody else's argument, then you can put in different things like CF, C for reference. You could put in EG, for example. You could put in IE, and that'll then correctly put that in the footnote for you with the right formatting and everything. But for now, I just want to have the page number. So I'm going to click enter. And so now I hope you can see well, but I'm looking here and I've got a great footnote for the first just general citation that I have of Sharp. And then also, then this next one, it's got a shortened, abbreviated format because this is just back to back with my initial one. So it's done the proper citation and the page number. So that is great. One thing I realized actually before I move on is that document I had already set the citation style, but typically that's something that Zotero will ask you to do. Okay, let me show you that again. I just realized I had kind of skipped a step. So you've got a new document. You say Welsh asserts ... We want to add a citation. And so, yes, okay, this is an important step. So each document, it gives you the choice of what type of citation style do you wish to use. And as Brady mentioned, if the professor has not specified, we would generally recommend going ahead and using Chicago Manual of Style 17 edition full note. But you can also see that they've got a ton of things already in here. One thing that is not naturally in here, but that is very easy to add is that SBL style that Brady was also mentioning. And so on that, where it had me choose the citation style, I simply clicked Manage Styles, and it comes up and you've got this option here that says Get Additional Styles. And so all you'd have to do is just type in Society of and then biblical literature, and then you can either use the author date or the full note, and typically you'd want to use the full note. And so I've already added that, but just wanted to flag that it won't be in there automatically, but you do have the option to add it in. All right, so we're going to go back here, and I'm going to just quickly add a citation for Stewart because I've already selected that I want this to be in Chicago style. And then we're going to add one for Welch, and then we will be ready to make our bibliography. All right, so it's just, it's that add edit citation. The red bar comes up, you type in what you want, you select it, you click on it if you want a page number, otherwise you just click enter, and you will see, oh, and you know what, I'm going to do Sharp one more time, because I just want to show you how smart Zotero is, and it is just such a time saver. Okay, so we're going to use Sharp one more time. And so what I wanted to show you, so Chicago used to be IBID. IBID is what you would put if you have back-to-back references. In the 17th edition, they've changed it so that it's just the last name and, and then if there's a page number. So this is like this is the replacement of IBID, and it automatically does that for you. Whereas here, this is in the shortened form of, okay, it's not back to back, so I'm not saying this is the same source as the one that was right above it, but I have already introduced this source. And so Just to note that when you are handwriting it, you've got to keep all of this in mind. Do I need the IBID form, or do I just need the shortened form? When you're doing Zotero, it takes care of all of that for you so that you don't actually even have to think about it. All right, so we will do, in one moment, we are going to do the bibliography, but I did promise that I would show you what if you caught belatedly that there's an error in Zotero. You would notice that that Welch one had not initially included a location. So what you would do is you'd simply, this book was published in New York, so you'd simply add New York, and then you want to kind of get out of that particular reference. So I'm going to click over to a different one. But as you see, it just automatically saves my change. And then up here at the top, there's a green arrow that says sync. So first I want to click the green arrow and let it finish cycling through. And then, as you'll see, there's a similar green arrow, except it's on a document here, and the icon says refresh. And so I'm going to click that here too. And then we'll see if it works the magic. And it did indeed. This now has New York, which is exactly what we wanted. All right, we are.
I just want to jump in here really quickly, Janelle, and yes. I want to just double down on your recommendation to actually edit the footnote in the Zotero library rather than editing it in your paper. Because if you edit the citation in your paper, it will not save for future use. And if, for instance, you were editing the title, not just the location, but information in that footnote that you wanted to appear later on in your paper, it wouldn't transfer that correction to all of your other instances. So anytime you make a correction to a citation, whether it's a misspelled word or the author's name or a location or something like that, you'll want to change it on the Zotero library side. Hit that green refresh button in your Zotero app, and then hit the green refresh button in your Word doc, and it will take care of all of those changes for you.
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Thank you, Brady. And that's also why it's important. It can be tempting to simply add in your citation and then say, oh, wait, I forgot to say that's on page 20. But if you do that, then every time you add in this reference, it's going to want to put in page 20. So you don't want to choose the page number there. You do want to choose the page number when you've got your source up. You've got it here, clicking on it, and then adding the page number here. That way Zotero can know and be aware that this is not a change for all references to that particular source, but is something you simply want to specify for this particular citation of it. All right, so there are two ways of building out your bibliography, both of them quite simple. Whoops, it would help if not that it really matters, but I wrote biography instead. Okay, now we've got bibliography. And so probably the preferred way of doing it would simply be to click this button here, and you'll see the icon has two books and the letter Z, and it says Add Edit Bibliography. So we are going to click on it. And sometimes it can take a moment, so we'll give it a second. It is building the suspense. So doing it this way, there we go. All right, now it's ready to show off. Building it this way, as you see, it will catch everything that I have cited in my paper, which is, really, really helpful. However, it could be that you have, whoops, I don't know what I clicked just then. Ignore that. So it could be, however, that you cite maybe, what if we actually did not cite Welch? So I'm deleting Welch, and I'm going to click refresh. And now, as you can see, ta-da, Welch is no longer there. But what if, I think, well, okay, I didn't cite Welch, but Welch did inform my thinking on my topic. I want to include everything that's in my project folder. I want to include in my paper's bibliography. What you could then do, instead of this very easy clicking on the books to create a bibliography based on your citations, if you want to just catch everything in your folder, what you do is just double click, and then it says create bibliography from collection. And just like your first citation on a new document, when you do create bibliography, it gives you an option of what style you want to pick. So Chicago, there's Society of Biblical Literature because we've added that previously. But I'm going to keep Chicago because that's what I've cited in. So I'm going to click OK. And then that has copied it to my clipboard. So all I have to do is the shortcut for paste, or I could have gone up here and then edit and paste. And now you'll see it's got the two sources that I've cited, but it adds in the third that I didn't cite, but I still wanted to include. So those are the two primary ways of making a bibliography. One other kind of fun thing that Zotero can do, I wouldn't recommend this for doing your bibliography, but what if maybe you've entered in a kind of complex citation and it is a chapter from an edited volume that has co-editors and maybe was translated, and you just want to make sure that Zotero is getting it right. One way that you can just kind of spot check that and visually see if Zotero is capturing things properly is I'm just simply going to click this and I'm going to pull it over, and look what it did. It just makes a nice little citation for me so that I can just do a quick visual check and say, okay, yeah, that checks out. That looks about what I'm expecting. So that's just a very quick thing to know that Zotero can do if you wish. Just pull something over like that. All right, so we've now cited in our paper. We have written our bibliography multiple times. And so let's just say that this is an actual paper and we are now ready to submit it. There is one final very important step, and that is this button up here, Unlink Citations. When you click that button, it's not going to delete your citations. So I'm going to do it and you'll see, I'm going to say okay. And you'll see that all my citations are still in here, properly ordered and everything. And so both the reason why you want to do this and a warning, two final points. The reason that this is important is that if you do not unlink and the person to whom you are submitting the paper does not have Zotero, then instead of these really nice little citations that we've just worked hard on making, they're going to see little boxes and like little squiggles, but the citation form is just not going to show up properly. It'll be one of those weird computer scripts that your professor likely cannot read. And so you don't want that. So that is why it's worth always remembering to unlink right before you submit. A warning, however, is that you don't want to do this step too soon. As I remember, I had pointed out like how it's so helpful that Zotero has done the proper ordering of citations for me, of what the citation should look like if I'm citing the same source back to back, but then also what it should look like if I'm citing the same source, but not back to back, not subsequently. Because as you can see, my citation number 1, my citation number 2, and my citation number 4 are all slightly different. And Zotero has kept track of that for me so that I don't have to. If you unlink and then you keep writing, or you realize, oh, wait, I forgot to, I wanted to analyze this and that and add in this other source, it will forget about what sources you've already cited. And so it won't be able to do these 3 different forms for you. And it's just going to put the full citation for everything, which is technically incorrect based on the Chicago Style 17th edition. So that is just the final piece of advice. Unlink before you send, but do unlink just as your very last step. And then other than that, you should hopefully be good to go. And just again, a reminder that all of this has been recorded in case I move too quickly, and that there are great help resources on Zotero.org. But I think that should cover it for now. So happy citing.
Thanks, Janelle. And I hope this was helpful to you all. I know sometimes learning Zotero or being refreshed on Zotero feels a bit like drinking from a fire hose. So just some key points. Zotero allows you to build your bibliography online by using the Zotero extension in either Chrome or Firefox. You can then edit your citation, make sure that the information comes into your Zotero library correctly, or remove material that you don't need. As you begin working in Word on your research paper, Zotero will prompt you to select your citation style. In any case, we recommend using the full note option that exists in both Chicago, SBL, and APA. You can then cite the works directly from your library in Zotero by using the connector by using the Word plugin in Word. If you run into any sorts of problems in your citation, maybe you notice that information is missing, or that information is incomplete, or a name is misspelled, make sure to edit that information in the library, in the Zotero app, not in your Word paper, and then follow through with the refresh buttons. And then you can create your bibliography either in Word or in the app by copy and pasting. And then as your last step, as Janelle just mentioned, and this is crucial, you want to unlink your Word document from your Zotero library, but only as the very last step, because once you unlink the information, there's no relinking it. And so any connections between your Zotero library, the Zotero app, and your Word document will be lost. And so Zotero won't be able to follow along. But if you wait until you're all done, then it will just come into your Word document sort of as if by magic, and it will be ready to go to send to your professor. A few questions have come in throughout the webinar, which I have taken the time to answer as we go. And I just want to highlight highlight a few common threads. First, we do recommend using Chrome or Firefox rather than Safari, or if you have a Microsoft system, the Microsoft internet browser. Chrome and Safari are a bit more nimble, and they're a little easier to use with Zotero. So go ahead and just download those if you don't have them already, and use those when you use Zotero. A reminder that Turabian and Chicago Style are the same style guide. So feel free to use those interchangeably. The main difference is in the actual physical guides themselves. So those of you who have maybe a copy of Turabian and a copy of the Chicago Handbook of Style on your desks at home, you can look at them and see the size difference. Chicago is about 2 times thicker than Turabian. And so Turabian is just sort of the student version. It has a lot of information. It has all the information you need and none of the information that you don't. And so we recommend using the Chicago 17th edition full note in Zotero. That should get you everything that you need. And then know that Zotero will follow all of the commands that you use in Word. So if you like to have your footnotes as size 10 or as size 12 in your Word document, Zotero will follow those commands, and those things should be set in your Word document, not in the Zotero app. And then a couple of questions that just came in just now. Someone is asking, is there a way to preview the unlinked version before submission? You can actually save your document as a PDF. This is another way to do it. If you save the document as a PDF instead of a Word file, it will capture all of the Zotero text, and you won't have to worry about unlinking the document. But we recommend either doing the PDF version before you submit or unlinking the Word document before you send to your professor. And remember, there is no way to relink those those footnotes once you've unlinked them. Someone else is asking if there's a preference for using Zotero in Word versus Zotero in Google Docs. I will say my preference, and this is just from my sort of personal side as a researcher and librarian, but my preference is for using Zotero in Word rather than Google Docs. I have had some issues arise on the Google Docs side, and it just seems to me to be much easier to resolve them in Word than in Google Docs. But again, if you have access to Google Docs or you prefer using Google Docs instead of Word, remember that Zotero help community is really robust, and someone has already probably wrestled with using Zotero in Google Docs. So I would just feel free to use either one. We're mostly familiar with using it in Word, but if you run into any problems, you can always turn to the Zotero help website. And then one final question coming in about the tags box in the bottom of the left-hand corner of the Zotero app. Does this search through your citations by theme? And the answer is yes. You could set up tags for individual items in your library. And then if you wanted to search by a theme, say Christology, you could search that in your own library, and anything that you've tagged as being relevant to theology or to Christology would show up in your results. But mostly, I think that's probably for best used by those with really fulsome research libraries who need to be able to sort things that way. We encourage most folks to just set up a Zotero folder in their Zotero library for particular assignments or particular classes, and then to go in and access their materials that way. It's just a little bit more intuitive in terms of accessing, unless you want to take the time, of course, to tag everything yourself. With that, I think we will go ahead and call it a day on our webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you have any questions, you can contact us at pits.emory.edu/ask. And as I mentioned, this webinar has been recorded, and you will receive a link in your inbox once it's been processed and is posted to the Big Marker website, and will be available for you to watch again in the future. Thank you all again, and we look forward to hearing from you. All the best.